Okay, so now let's move ahead and explore that trick a little more. So we were wanting to switch between T1, T2, T3, and we said each one of them will have separate stack, S1, S2, S3. And by the way, when I say separate stack, it's the same memory, just different locations in the memory, right? This is S2, this is S1. So task 1 uses this, task 2 uses this, task 3 uses this. That's the idea when, so I'm just representing, this. Okay, the diagram became too complicated and confusing, but this memory region is represented here, right? And then we talked about the fact that the CPU has registers, R0 through R15. There is program counters, there is XPSR or APSR, EPSR, IPSR, combinations of that, then some other registers, and that is the context. And we talked about each stack having a dummy context to begin with, and somehow the CPU wanting to switch between them. We then talked about a notion of alarm, right? And that's what I want to spend rest of this lecture on. So the CPU, when it is executing task 1, wouldn't bother. It'll just kind of, go ahead, fetch instructions, execute those, and move on. So the question is, at what point does it remember, or how do we get it to remember that, hey, go ahead and do the context switch now, because we only have one CPU. So somehow the same CPU needs to have two brains, right? It needs to execute the task and also after some time remember that, hey, okay, I'm done reading the current book. I must put a bookmark, go take the next book. So somewhere then there has to be some logic on context switching. So there has to be some other code somewhere that instructs that, hey, okay, move from T1 to T2, right? And this code needs an opportunity to run. And how will that happen, right? And that's when we come to the concept of this alarm, or the my suggestion or nudge here is that this alarm is the one that will get the CPU to execute this code. And after the CPU is done executing this code, it automatically jumps to the next task. That's my claim. Let's see how that happens. So the idea then is this. You have a CPU, and CPU can, well, execute tasks, or it can execute interrupt handler. And from our earlier discussion on exception handling, and interrupt is a kind of exception. So what we are supposed to now do is, when the CPU is executing T1 happily, after some time, if there is an interrupt, the CPU will first jump to the interrupt context. It will execute some other code to deal with the interrupt, and once it's done, it will want to return here. That is what the CPU normally does. That is what we have discussed as part of the exception handling protocol. What we would want to do now is let T1 run for a set duration, then have an interrupt fire, and within that interrupt code, what we are going to do is trick the CPU into jumping to task T2, and that trick also comes in a bit. The idea then is that as the interrupt handler finishes and the CPU wants to switch back to or return back to T1, well, the CPU is going to go look somewhere for that information as to, hey, where did I come from in the interrupt handler, and where should I go back to? So the where should I go back to, if it figures that it should go back to T2, then we have managed to trick the CPU. And this is so important that I need to retreat this. So we had the T1 that was running. Then at this point, an interrupt happened. So when the interrupt happens, and the CPU was using stack 1 at this point. So when the interrupt happens, the CPU saves on stack S1 the information about where it needs to come back to for continuing T1. Fair? So at this point, it then jumps to interrupt handler. And as part of the interrupt handler, it does some computation, and something happens here. Something happens within the interrupt handler such that it goes and picks up the saved context from stack 2. Saved context, live context, or the handmade, specially crafted context from S2, loads that into the CPU register, and the CPU is tricked into executing T2. Right? So this is called the exception entry. This is called exception exit. And the idea is that we enter from one task while executing one task. Then we prepare or do some magic within the interrupt handler such that it exits to another task. This is the key. This is the magic sauce. And if you have understood this, again, the details we haven't gotten into yet. We'll get to that. That's the whole point of this section. But if you can make peace with the fact that there are 3 different stacks, each task uses its own stack, and when the interrupt happens, how that happens, we'll come to it. But when the interrupt happens, the context is saved on the stack. The context meaning the current set of CPU registers is saved on the stack. And the CPU goes on to executing the interrupt handler. And when it's done executing the interrupt handler, and the interrupt handler is where we do the magic. And what magic is this? The scheduling magic, right? The scheduling magic happens within the interrupt handler such that during the interrupt handler or the exception exit, it is going to fetch context for a different task, right? And here's another food for thought. What trick, what single thing should it change here in the interrupt handler? What should it do such that it goes on to fetching the context for T2? And I'll just give away the answer up front right now and see if you can make sense out of it. It's like up till this point, it was using the stack pointer 1. If only we can change the stack pointer of the CPU, and that's the trick really. If we can change this to S2, while exiting, it will pick everything from S2. And while saving, it is going to save everything to S1. So when we were executing S2, or sorry, when we were executing T2 and the interrupt handler was called, it will use S2, so it saves the task 2 related context on S2. And then again, we change the stack pointer to S3. So during the exit, it kind of is pointing to S3 and picks up the context for task 3 from there. So kind of try and make peace with this fact that during the interrupt handler, it is using the stack pointer for the current process. And just before exiting the interrupt handler, if it changes the stack pointer to that of the next process, then during the exit, it is going to pop out the context for the task 2, the next task, so to speak. Which then means that this interrupt handler needs to have information about what are the three stack pointers? And it needs to be aware that, hey, previously I had picked S1. Next time I'm going to execute, I'm going to use S2 for this swapping out. And next time, you know, that I'm called, or this interrupt handler is going to be called, is going to swap it with S3. Now, we didn't talk about what the interrupt handler is. We didn't talk about what this interrupt is. We only talked about the fact so far that a CPU, when it executes T1, can only execute T1 continuously. To make it execute the scheduler code, there needs to be an interrupt, because once an interrupt happens, CPU saves its current state, decides to jump to a predefined location as per the calling convention, or as per the exception handler, exception model, so to speak. It'll jump to a predefined location where we'll have the interrupt handler, the ISR. Also, the ISR is the scheduler. And while it is executing the scheduler, it does something with the stack pointer values such that when it's done executing that interrupt, when the CPU is trying to restore its context back to go back and execute the process, instead of executing T1, it executes T2, right? So that is essentially at the crux of how scheduling works. And now we'll talk about what this interrupt is. So the interrupt that we are going to do, or that we are going to, the trick that we are going to use is the timer interrupt. So the CPU has, in case of M-class CPUs, it has an internal peripheral called the sysTick. It's a 24-bit timer. It's a counter essentially, but counts clock cycles. So it counts down. So we're going to load a value here, and every time it reaches 0, it kind of gives an interrupt to the CPU. And so what the CPU does is it jumps to a predefined location. Obviously, before it jumps to that predefined location, it saves the current status of the CPU registers on the stack. So if it was executing T1, it was using S1 as the stack. And when it wanted to save the current status of the CPU, the current context of the CPU, that'll go on S1. Then it jumps onto the sysTick handler, so to speak. And within this, what we do is do few more stuff, a bunch of few other bookkeeping stuff, and then change the stack pointer to S2. And then we exit out. And as we exit out, it pulls the context from S2, the stack S2, and that is for task 2. So what comes in CPU is 2. And the sysTick here, the thing that we are doing, is kind of reprogramming the sysTick timer that, hey, after 10 milliseconds, give me another ping, me meaning the CPU. And as that happens, the interrupt keeps coming, the tasks keep on getting swapped out. And in this fashion, then the CPU is able to run multiple processes in a round robin fashion. Again, now we'll dive into the details of how this needs to be done in form of like code. And I'll show you also in the documentation how the context switching, what registers are saved, what part we need to save, so on and so forth. And then we'll also talk about how to program the sysTick. And once that's done, we'll dive into the code, implement the scheduler. All right, so hopefully you are convinced about the trick. The trick is set an external timer, use the interrupt handler as scheduler, right? That is the trick. So the ISR is the scheduler, and we also talked about somewhere we need to have kind of a mapping of, okay, how many stacks do I have? And the number of stacks I have are the number of tasks that I have. So somewhere we also need to save the information about S1, S2, and S3 that we'll talk about. Next, we'll take a look at the SysTick timer, its programming, the exception entry and exit part, just so that things are clear to you. Then we dive into the code and repeat all of what we have learned so far. So with that, I'll see you in the next one.